Hello, everyone. This is Matthew. This is volume 4 of my video diary of my novel writing. Today is Saturday, March 22nd, and it is a fairly nice spring day. I can finally say that, spring day. Spring happened 2 days ago, so we're very happy up here in frigid Canada to be having spring, although in Canada, spring is often in quotation marks until it is summer, and then it's actually just summer. So that aside, I'm excited and ecstatic about the existence of spring and it's the fact that it's here now. And I also have some good news about my writing process in that last week I wrote 2,607 words, which brings my total number of words up to 13,291 words, which I guess means if I'm aiming for 100,000 words or around there, that means that I have done 13% of my first draft, which, woo, exciting, yay! I've also written about half of this second chapter that I'm working on, which is exciting and terrifying once again because I have to figure out a way to finish it before too long because I'm getting close. And I've also one of the benefits to stepping away from one of the chapters that I was previously writing is that I've now started to think about how I can solve the problem I had with that first chapter, which was I had all these ideas that I wanted to include in that chapter, but I couldn't figure out a way to do it. And now I've figured out partially a way to do it. So when I have a chance, I'm going to insert that piece of writing into the first chapter. It'll probably be ugly, probably just be me jamming it in there more of as a placeholder than as actual, oh, this flows very beautifully and everything. But that's what I intend to do. I've also had some interesting ideas about what I will do later in terms of developing the writing and developing the style of this novel. And I really do need to work on the style. What is the style going to be? I don't really know yet. So that is something I'm going to think about. And yeah, apart from that, I do also kind of want to talk about this week. Not necessarily a happy topic, but rejection. And I wanted to talk about it because I think this week I was under a lot of stress for various reasons. And when you're trying to work on a project and you're feeling a lot of stress, sometimes your confidence about what you're doing or what you're writing can start to erode. And that happened with me this week. It did happen to me a little bit. And at the same time, I was also noticing, or in the last few weeks, I've heard of some people I know who are doing quite successfully and who are very successful in their careers, and it's due to their hard work, and they're very talented, and they deserve it in every way. But at the same time, it can start to eat at you as well, because then you start to go, well, what am I doing wrong? What is the thing that is missing in the way in which I'm doing things that's not allowing me to achieve in the same way? So that can be a very disastrous place to go, because starting to second guess what you're doing as a writer while you're in mid-project is not very good, but just in general is probably not very helpful, because you can spend hours and hours analyzing why you're not as successful as someone else, and it won't necessarily make you as successful as that other person. And of course, you may never be as successful as that other person. Your product may be appealing to a completely different audience, and therefore may not be what will make you a lot of success. And I know this, I know this deeply as someone who writes a particularly niche area. I know that I'm not necessarily going to appeal to everyone. At the same time, I do deeply want to appeal to everyone. And so it does hurt sometimes when I realize that the world isn't exactly the way I want it to be. And this does bring me to the idea of I've received some rejection from some of the stories that I've written recently, and the rejection was very positive and I received a rejection letter recently that was handwritten, and it provided all sorts of great feedback, and it was wonderful and lovely in every way. And yet I felt that in some ways it missed the point, and it missed the point because I don't think they understood the world that I was writing about and the world that I inhabit. And so, one of the things that we talked about in my writing program was how you should always write from the periphery as if it's the center. We're all writing from peripheries in the sense of we're always writing as a member of a minority, unless we do really think that we're a member of a majority completely. And but we have to write as if that our minority is the center of the world, which is a beautiful and inspiring way to think about things. But at the same time, what no one tells you is that the people outside of your particular niche aren't necessarily going to think that your writing is all that amazing. They're not necessarily going to find what you're writing to be that crucial or important. And that, I think, is the big problem that no one really talks about, is that you may write beautifully and write as if your periphery is at the center, but in the end, no one may care. And I think what I've come to realize is that if you do want to have a wider audience than just the particular niche that you're writing for, then you have to imagine yourself as being not just in the periphery, that you have to be a sort of transitional figure. You have to be on the boundary between spaces, between worlds. And you have to write as if you're on that boundary between worlds. So this is something that I'm trying to think about, and trying to think about an authentic way to create a boundary between my world and what I believe is the world outside my world. And this novel, in some ways, is that attempt. But it's a difficult and challenging process. And it does sometimes make you feel like, you're quote unquote selling out, although not, who knows what that selling out means. But it also just means that it can be frustrating to look at people who just naturally are appealing to that wider audience. And you can wonder, once again, what you're doing wrong. And so I had recourse this week to think about two of my favorite quotes. And they are "Genius is patience," and that is supposed to be from Proust. Who knows if it's actually from Proust? But I really like it. And it's the idea that, or at least this is how I interpret it, that you should always try to go in the direction that you believe, and your genius will be recognized if you're just simply patient about it. If you just keep heading in that direction, eventually people will notice. Once again, this may be a beautiful idea that never actually comes to fruition, but I do prefer it to the idea that no, just give up. And the other one it's actually from Sylvia Plath, and it's from her diaries. And I'm not getting the quote right here, but it's that to counter any feelings of envy, you should always have a source of joy. And that's the only cure for envy, or feeling like you're not necessarily performing as well as other people. And nurturing that sense of joy in yourself in whatever way you can. In my way, it is through my writing. So it is oftentimes I have to just keep going back to my writing and just keep refocusing on it, because that will give me the joy even when I don't necessarily feel the confidence. And then maybe the joy will give me confidence. But it's hard. It's a hard slog sometimes, and it was a bit of a hard slog this week, to be honest. Okay, so aside from all that, I did get 2,600 words done, and I'm still proceeding. And a lot of what I'm writing is terrible, but I do not care. I'm just writing it, and I will get this done. Yes, I will. Woo! Okay. So I did want to keep you updated on how well I'm doing with Madame Bovary. And I'm about two-thirds the way through now. And I read quite quickly last week because I've gotten to the part that I do not like. And I do not like it because I find it kind of boring. And spoiler alert, if you're planning on reading Madame Bovary, be aware that she has a boring uh, liaison with a gentleman named Rodolphe. And it's intentionally boring. Like it is, Flaubert has intentionally written it in such a way that it is incredibly cliched, and and he wants you to see it as cliched because, and he gives a reason for that in this passage, which I actually was quite interested to read because I never really noticed it before. And it says, this is Rodolphe thinking. One had to discount, he thought, exaggerated speeches that concealed commonplace affections, as if the fullness of the soul did not sometimes overflow in the emptiest of metaphors, since none of us can ever express the exact measure of our needs, or our ideas, or our sorrows, and human speech is like a cracked kettle on which we beat out tunes for bears to dance to when we long to inspire pity in the stars. So that's an interesting passage because it's, well, I mean, first of all, it's the standard sort of language is terrible and we'll never be able to fully express our ideas. And even that, in some ways, is a cliche of an idea. It goes back several centuries. So there's that. He's being ironic even while Rodolphe is expressing this feeling. And I'm not sure if he's being ironic about that metaphor, because the metaphor seems actually quite, powerful to me. It's quite beautiful, but he might be joking about it. He might be saying, "Oh, this is just another commonplace metaphor." We're beating a tune on the side of a drum, and so it's a complicated idea. But basically, I think it's trying to signal to the reader that Flaubert is aware that Rodolphe and Madame Bovary use a lot of empty metaphors and empty phrases that really do signify not a lot. And I think they are phrases that would have been very common to the reader of that particular period. Like they just seem really canned. They seem very 19th century as opposed to some of the other parts of the book. And so there's this. So it's not the most enjoyable. When you're reading someone and he's making an extended joke about two people, I talked last week about the ironic and the pathetic. This is a little too much weighting on the irony side and less on the pathetic side for me. Particularly because Madame Bovary gets very upset about Rodolphe and his behavior, but he's such a jerk and he doesn't, I don't know, he's not really giving her anything, so I find it hard to care about how sad she gets because it's like he's a jerk. Why care about him? So it's a hard part of the book to get through. I'm a little, I feel like I'm being pushed out a little bit. And it's bringing up this idea once again of, how much, what exactly, well, first of all, how much is Flaubert reaching out to the reader? This is his own little private idea of let's make fun of the traditional ideas of romance. And when you limit the amount of pleasure there is in that particular passage. And it's also just this idea that, what exactly is he trying to accomplish in, he's trying to accomplish this in the ideas of the book, but what is he trying to accomplish for the feelings of the reader? And that, I think, is really interesting. It, you know, throughout the book, and in these chapters, particularly when he's talking about the romance, there are these long passages that are very beautifully written, but written in a very conventional way. They're often about nature, for instance, and they're very lyrical. And he can do this gorgeous, beautiful lyricism. At the same time, you're like, really, this. I feel like you're. I feel like I'm bored by it, and I want something more interesting. And then he kind of kills the romance sometimes by having a phrase at the end or sentence at the end that is meant to be gross or not beautiful, and that is supposed to kind of deflate the beauty. And so once again, it's like I can see the point there. He's trying to be very ironic and, oh, look at this, I'm da 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 da. But what is the reader supposed to think? Either the reader is supposed to read this and go, oh, it's so beautiful, oh, and then be a little annoyed, or they're supposed to be annoyed by it. And I actually like that last sentence because it's usually something that's more real than what's previously been listed. So it is sort of interesting in that I don't really know what Flaubert is trying to achieve in the reader and whether it's making people, whether it's something we should, I don't know, whether he's even thinking about it really. Like, is he? I'm not sure. So, yeah, these are my thoughts on it. Not necessarily fully formed, but then that's why I'm doing a diary. I'm not necessarily writing all this stuff down. There is one thing, though, that I really, really liked about this chapter and that I'd never noticed before, which is that there is, once again, spoiler alert, there is a scene of a person getting surgery done to them, and basically their leg is amputated after a horrible infection takes place. And this scene is in the middle of the romance. Like, the romance happens, and then in the middle of it, this surgery happens, and then after is the end of the romance. And I think this is quite obviously meant to be a symbol. And there is this implication that the romance is kills Madame Bovary's marriage, really, her like authentic feelings for her husband, because this romance kills it, and it's almost like her romance with her husband is being cut off, like this gangrenous leg. And that's a little obvious, but it is this sort of visceral feeling of like something's being cut off here, something is being irrevocably destroyed and thrown away. And it is a really horrible scene. It's disgusting. I'm finding that I get more squeamish with body horror things as I get older. And I found it very difficult to read this chapter. And so but I enjoyed the effect that it was giving, because it was, once again, it was this horrible thing in the middle of this kind of like conventionally beautiful romance. And it just reminded me of how playing with people's visceral reactions can be a very powerful way to tell a story, that you don't want to keep everything in the same mode of like everything like, oh, this is all relationship talk, or oh, this is all scary stuff, or this is kind of contemplative, boring stuff. So it's good to have moments where it breaks through, and there's the emotions change in very sharp and differentiated waves for the reader. So I mean, once again, I could go on forever about this stuff, but I'm going to cut it off here. And I'll finish off by saying, once again, if you want to ask me questions, or you want to comment on what I've said, or, tell me I'm amazing, I probably need You can email me at the email address that's listed in the description. Otherwise, I hope I'm going to be writing a lot more next week, and I'll see you at that time. Okay, bye-bye.